Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
and the Bunny. We have a little prepared introduction for you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki, or Anuna, were a group of deities of the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, as well as the Babylonians. In the earliest Sumerian writings about them, which come from the post-Akkadian period, the Anunnaki are descendants of An and Kai, the god of the heavens and the goddess of earth, and their primary function was to decree the fates of humanity.
It is no secret to our listeners that the Anunnaki gods supposedly created the missing link between primitive man and modern man as a way of forming a race of slaves through hybridization. It is no secret that many consider these gods to be aliens.
The slaves, or humankind, would create idols, small statuary, that they worshipped as if the clay were, in fact, the actual gods. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians all performed sorcery, and magic that is not dissimilar to the magic and witchcraft often performed today.
The ancient people often looked to the sky for celestial omens that could reveal the Assyrian king to be in imminent danger or portend fortuitous circumstances in war. Magic could also be used to combat the negative actions of ghosts, demons, and human sorcerers, as well as protect against the curse, like the Akkadian Mitu, that resulted from unknowingly committing a sin, thus losing favor in one's personal gods or goddesses.
The responsibilities of the Mesopotamian magician could come under the umbrella of a number of specialties that we might refer to as magical, scientific, medical, literary, and religious, where the ancient sorcery was part of daily life.
The ancient people also used more modest clay figurines as a means of guarding their homes. Found at a number of Neo-Assyrian sites, clay figurines were made in the forms of gods, animals, and hybrid creatures. These objects were deposited in boxes beneath the floors of homes in locations believed to be most susceptible to malevolent spirits. Corners, doorways, and other permeable thresholds between the human realm and the underworld. Since this level of earth was thought to be more vulnerable to malevolent spirits, ancient Assyrians in particular conversely used the space to insert representations of benevolent spirits made from clay to avert evil.
Figurines of dogs in clay or bronze were also deposited beneath the earth, and in some cases they were inscribed with explicit instructions to act on behalf of the persons for whom they were carved or cast. Dogs in particular were associated with healing goddesses, notably Gula, the Great One, who is often addressed as a great physician. Gula was often invoked in healing rituals and incantations, and the image of the dog was emblematic of her protective and healing presence. These were necessary because true evil existed in their worlds.
The human body is also considered susceptible to harm from demons and other malevolent forces, so various adornments were created as a safeguard of such events. Small pieces such as amulets depicting the demon goddess Lamashtu, who attacked pregnant women and infants, and pendants of the ferocious wind demon Pazuzu, who would later gain fame in the Exorcist movies, would have been worn by a person as a form of portable protection.
These amulets show in miniature the creatures whose powers the amulet was meant to deflect. In the case of Lamashtu, her image was often surrounded by depictions of ritual offerings and an incantation appealing to the powers of the beneficent. Thank you, gods, bless you. Possibly to neutralize the harmful effects of this vicious, inducing demon.
As we know, similar traditions have carried through from every culture, from every corner of the planet, be it the ancient Incan demons or the indigenous people of North America, and the star people and the ancient Egyptians and the mighty gods of India. People have looked to the celestial heavens, knowing that there is something else there that meets the eye. Sometimes looking after the civilizations, sometimes looking to destroy or even just torture them. So we hope you appreciated that. It was sort of an experiment.
Yeah.
We're Bigfoot and the Bunny. I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm Kristen Johnson.
And we have a special Sunday edition. Hey, I'm so excited.
Comments for me.
This is going to be so cool.
Yeah.
We're going to get our comments up here and say hi to you guys. Hey, Johnny Mariner, how you doing?
Hi, Johnny.
Stephen Woodward,
hey, Steve.
Owner of the Paranormal United Network. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you. Bob Burnell, what's going on, pal? What is happening? Joshua Dixon.
Joshua.
Thanks for the shout out the other day, Joshua. We really appreciated that. That was awesome.
Very much so. Thank you.
Courtney Peterson. Hello.
Hi, Courtney.
Thank you for being patient with us. We have an amazing show. Really, truly great friend, our brother from another mother, as we often say. He truly is. He is like our family. Has joined us. It's UFOlogist, Demonologist, Nathaniel J. Gillis. And we're going to bring him right on right now. What's going on, buddy?
Hello there.
What's going on, guys? Love and miss you guys, man. It's good to be back on with you. It's been a minute.
We love and miss you too, man.
Yes, we do.
And people may have seen that picture in our ad.
Yes.
It was a night we were just out raising a little bit of heckany is in there.
Federal Hill.
On Federal Hill.
That picture is so funny.
Serves the finest foods in Rhode Island. Hey there, Hi, hey there, Debbie. How you guys doing? How you been? Man. A lot has gone on since we last got together.
Yeah. When was the last time? Was it last year?
No.
It was this year. It was earlier.
You're right. Yeah, I got you.
Was it July?
Yeah.
A little bit, but I think it was right before you started your new show, and I do want to get a little pluggage out there for the new show that you're doing, because it is awesome.
I hope so, man. It's unique because it's almost like giving a new lecture every week. It's difficult, right? You have to keep the information flowing and fresh and unique. And
a lot of research.
Yeah, man. It's an hour, 2 hour show every week, and it's like you're on the spot. You got to talk.
Yeah,
it's not an interview. You know what I mean? So it's tough, but it's going good. Thank God.
It's called the Ghost Notes, and you're doing that with Rex from Leak Project. Right.
Yes, sir. Every Thursday night at 9 p.m. And the other night, my subject was the hybridization program in ufology and how the roles that they've played throughout history regarding that phenomenon. So it's been interesting. Last time I did that show, I've had tons of women and even men come forward with their stories confirming the research that I'm doing. And I think as a researcher, that's the best they can ask for, right? When people are saying, hey, listen, I've never told this story to anybody, but, I have an advocate in you. So I'm excited about it. We're up to, I think, 10,000 views in a 24-hour period.
Damn, so, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
man,
some serious viewage.
Yeah, man.
That
so
is awesome. There's Zoe. That is my daughter. Hey, Zoe. Good to see you on. My beautiful daughter, who I believe had some unusual scratchings on her. And we were talking. This was weird because I was putting together the ad for tonight's show. And I thought, my first thought, of course, is the scarification pictures that maybe we can get into a little bit later. I've got those prepared. Was a bit more elaborate than what happened to Zoe. But, hey, we don't know. These things happen. And glad you're watching, Zoe. Enjoy. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Our buddy Greg Koss.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, what's going on? And Raymond. All right, let's get right to things. So the Ghost Notes you're on, I think it's mostly Thursdays, right? And it's on Leak Project. You guys are familiar with Leak Project. I wanted to get that out there. We'll revisit that and let people know before we're done. But it's good stuff.
It's awesome.
I appreciate it, man. It's it's kind of it makes me emotional sometimes when I think about it. Like my very first show ever was Coast to Coast, and now it's literally I have my own show on Leak Project. It's kind of like, there was a day that I didn't know anybody. I didn't know you guys, and I was just kind of a lone ranger / researcher, just doing my own thing. And now it's like kind of blows my mind, man. I'm real humbled by it, and just glad to be with you guys. I miss you all. We need to go to Federal Hill again soon and tear that place up. Like we did at Constantino's, 3 different entrees at the same table. You know how we do it.
I love that story.
Yes.
No one eats like demonologists.
No,
I don't know what it is, man. But
we don't understand it.
guys we know that are into it, it's like they got an inner demon that's just hungry.
We always
It's hungry all the
yeah.
time. It says, "I gotta feed me."
So much food and so fast. It goes down so fast. I'm like, people chew.
Gluttonous, man. We were gluttonous. What was it? Chicken parmesan?
Oh yeah, it's hanging
lobster ravioli.
It looks like a tuna fillet or something. This giant thing hanging off.
Oh, it was incredible.
Yeah, it was so good.
It is good, but for goodness sake, chew your food.
But anyway,
yes,
we always have a good time, man. It's good to be with you guys. I'm excited to get into the research. There's a lot to cover.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us where your research is taking you. I know you and I talk about it offline. We all do, but you let our audience know, like, what's new. Maybe walk us through how it connects to where you started with this.
I think above all else, in antiquity, we did encounter entities that were handing down information to us, how to perform certain rituals, how to get in contact with them. And my question is, how did they know that? How did these beings know how to create amulets, right? And so it's almost like we're dealing with interdimensions, which, so it points to the fact that these beings are still working in some source of like high magic of some kind. And that we're learning that more and more as we get into ufology, the abduction phenomenon, incubi and succubi case studies. So whatever we're dealing with, I believe it is a direct threat to us. It's not lovers of light, as we both talked about many times. And the case studies, the data certainly suggests that. And that's where I'm at with it, I'm researching it because... Like
there is a message that just seems to be coming through the kind of the mainstream and even underground, Yeah, they're just here to help. They're just trying to help us out, right? And in some cases, maybe that's true. But, you can't just discount the whole phenomena as like a positive thing.
Right. And that's what I was talking about on my show the other night. And admittedly, the topic of discussion on the table was pretty disturbing. I went into case studies of my own, women that I've worked with, families that I've worked with who have suffered from the phenomenon. And my basic statement to everybody who's watching is, listen, it's not okay when these beings abduct women and inseminate them. You cannot romanticize trauma. It's not okay. And so there is a great deal of human rights on our part that are being just completely obliterated, right? And for them to do what they're doing. And so that's where I'm at right now, trying to understand the hybridization program. What I've really been looking for is victimology. You understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. Their victimology, because if I get into their victimology, then that will lead me to their pathology. And so those two are intimately connected. And I think that somewhere in the darkness, I'll stumble onto a revelation that'll hopefully add value to the research. But those are the two components that I'm most after right now.
Excellent.
Now, when you say hybridization program, what do you mean by that?
So this program has been occurring for thousands and thousands of years. It's not a modern phenomenon. We may have modern researchers who just started their research in the 60s, but it's been going on way beyond that. The hybridization program is essentially when a woman is abducted, or even in the debunk phenomenon, an entity manifests to her in a dream and inseminates her. She is pregnant with a fetus. About 4 months later, she has another encounter with the entity. Next thing you know, the baby's gone. It's taken. We have case study after case study after case study. And just recently, even my cases, where women thought that it was a dream encounter. They thought it was just a nightmare, even virgins. And until they go to the doctor and have surgery, and the doctor asks them in no uncertain terms, why is there fetal tissue here? Why do you have scar tissue? It looks like you've given birth, or you've at least incubated a fetus. Right, that's the hybridization program. And so the idea, at least in modernity, with a lot of these researchers, is that these ETs are cloning us, or they're adding DNA to us, and so there's kind of a mutation in us as a species. I think it's even darker than that, but I think that's a good foundation to operate off of.
Absolutely. One of the questions out there in the audience, I think, relates directly to this. And Johnny asked about, is this connected to cattle mutilation? And it's often thought that, the reason why the cattle mutilation occurs is that they're trying to change the genetic structure of the cows for something that may be of their gain. Is it the same with people?
I think it is. And I think because I am a proponent of the single field theory. So I think it's a single origin. I think these are all the same beings. They're just wearing different masks. They're doing, performing different roles. But when we look at cattle mutilation, it's the same phenomenon in the sense that Skinwalker Ranch, we have cases where they've caught these entities on film where they're completely invisible, and all we're watching and all they're watching is the cattle being mutilated. We cannot see the entity, but we can see the actual cow responding to the entity that's there next to it. It's the same thing Barry Taff had, a parapsychologist with Doris Bilther, who was being attacked by an incubi spirit. Her sons were witnessing her body.
That's right.
Responding to an entity that was invisible to the eye. And so that's why, again, I believe it's the same origin, same technology, if you wouldn't even say that. But that just goes to show us again that the implication's terrifying. All we're seeing on our side of the mirror is the cow responding to an entity. We don't really yet know what that entity is.
And sometimes parts are missing of those cows that unexplainably, with no surgical scars, they'll be missing like one of their stomachs. I think they have something like 20 stomachs.
No, they do.
They do. They have several. And one will be missing or something like that, and then they'll smash the body as if it was dropped.
Yeah, they drop it
from a height. We don't know what that is, but there's a lot of damage to the body left over, and no marks. Where these surgeries more or less took place, which is just amazing and fascinating. Like why they bother with the cows, but I think it happens to people too. Now, when you say these women are being seduced. How are they going about that?
It's pretty horrifying. And it's a behavioral pattern that stretches all throughout history. It's not a modern phenomenon. There are cases going on even as we speak. The classic abduction account essentially is that an entity that will appear to a female in the image of a lover, a husband, somebody they've already been intimate with, and it will use that role, literally pluck a memory out of the mind and step into it, use that image of that person to manufacture consent within the woman and then inseminate her. Like I tell people, I had a case study in India. A young lady she had said she had 7 different partners throughout her life, and the entity had manifested in the image of every one of them. It's incredible. Not only that, but it manifested first in the images of the men that did not wear protection, because it was trying to increase the probability of insemination, which is deeply, deeply disturbing, because what we're realizing is the entity itself is adapting to us, right? It's like a code. It's trying to break our code. What about this image? Will you consent to this? And then finally, the female, either through a dream state or being seduced by an entity, will give in. And the next day, the next month, she'll realize, okay, it wasn't just a dream, and that wasn't actually my husband or my boyfriend. It was a demon or an entity. Then they're pregnant. And so in my research, the biggest interconnectivity that I found is quite alarming, guys. It's called the red rite. And so the red rite is a ritual of high magic. What would happen was when a magician was dying, he would go out and create a relationship with a woman. Hello, UFO abduction phenomenon. And then it would inseminate her. Hello, missing fetus syndrome and incubi, right? And then he would create a fetus in her womb. At a certain point, he would remove the fetus through a ritual and then possess it as his own. So now he has a new body to possess. It's called the red rite. And so what I think is occurring, even throughout all of history, is that we're witnessing certain aspects of one event occurring. And we're just now starting to realize that these beings are taking fetuses and they are possessing them. It was Betty Luca who was abducted, and she asked one of the entities, where do these grays come from? And the entities told her they come from the fetuses that we are taking out of the womb. So again, you're taking the fetus and you're possessing it. It's your consciousness in that baby. So I think that's, again, touches on the hybridization program. It's far darker than what people would like it to be. It's very dark.
A comment out here from Joshua says, my friend swears her baby had a twin. Her son was born, but her daughter was taken out of her uterus. When Holland was born, she had 2 water sacs, showing there were 2 babies, right? And then, yet there was only 1 baby there.
So that's part of a missing fetus syndrome.
Absolutely. But you see how covert they are, right?
Right. This is just our audience, there it is.
And it's happening everywhere. These entities will monitor the fertility of a woman. They'll start haunting them and hunting them as early as 12 when they enter into puberty. When they step into, being a female and woman, next thing you know, they're being abducted. They're being literally, and I hate to say this because it sounds like it's Jeffrey Dahmer, but they're being groomed as a breeder.
Right.
And so what we have now in the field is that it's a human rights issue. And we have people in the field who are accepting that role and acting as if this is a godly thing and that everything's great.
Miracle.
And it's right. It's an immaculate conception.
Right.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting.
It is. It's like a pedophile almost, victimology.
Yes.
Right. And we're just like nothing to them. They're basically lab rats.
That's it.
A couple of the comments out there mentioned like a sex dream, and Joshua said, it happens in the subconscious too, when they're sleeping and wake up. And those are referring to things like the hypnagogic and hypnopompic states, right? Hypnagogic where you're falling asleep, hypnopompic where you're waking up. I know Kristen and I have had a variety of experiences in those states that, seem unexplainable and very, very, very real. Right. Nothing to the degree of what we're talking about here, no missing fetuses, but certainly paranormal effects, which goes with Bob's question. Are ETs and the paranormal connected? Yes, so we're going to get into that, but those states do seem to be that sort of gateway portal, not exclusively. I mean, people, do have alien abduction. They have encounters with demonic forces when they're wide awake and very conscious, but it seems like a vulnerable time.
Yes, absolutely. I just now recently started sharing my own experience with the succubus. I probably shared it with you guys, but now I'm publicly sharing it in these shows that I'm doing. A few years back, I was engaged to a girl, and it was a Friday night / Saturday morning, and we're in bed. We're both knocked out. It was a long week. We're both tired. We're sleeping. REM. You know how it is, man. A long week, just wore out. And in this dream, it's a nightmare. And in this dream, there is a featureless shadow figure. It was a woman, long hair. It looked exactly like my ex if you were to put her in a room and turn the lights off, right? Same frame, everything, same hair length, same hairstyle. Is crazy. And in the dream, she's straddling me, and I'm fighting her. Like we're engaged and like just trying to push her off me and everything. And I've been in this field and long enough to know when it's a spiritual attack. I knew it was. It felt like it. And what was terrifying for me is usually when you wake up from a nightmare, there's nothing left. It's a dream. It's over with. You may be terrified still, but there's nothing there in this reality. However, that wasn't the case that night. When I opened my eyes and my eyes adjusted to the darkness, that entity was present with me and on top of me. And so this is fascinating. It transcended 2 dimensions. One was the dream state. The other was reality.
Oh, my goodness.
And so when I looked at this entity, I'm like, I could barely see it. I'm patting my fiance. Is this you? Is this you? Is this you? Please tell me it's you. Hey, baby, is this you? And she leans up, looks at me and goes, what are you talking about? When that happens, this entity puts one leg over, looks at me like this, and just fades off into the darkness. So now this gets into what are dreams exactly. Are dreams reality, or is this reality? And how are they using the dream state as a portal, right, to enter into this world? This is why a lot of demons in antiquity were called dream demons, because it wasn't that they would just show up in your dreams and make it a nightmare. They would often, and more often than not, they would induce you into a dream state and then step into the dream they just induced.
Right. No,
you can tell I'm starting to feel better now.
Yeah, totally fascinating. You know, and science does not have a good explanation for these states. They don't have a good explanation for sleep, period. But one of the things I brought up on our Thursday show with Dr. Michael Lynch was about these states and how science is treating them. If you Google hypnagogic or hypnopompic states, you'll immediately see the word hallucinations come up as, you know, like a common Google search, and you can just click on it, right, without starting to type hallucinations, which will bring you to things like WebMD, which says things like these hallucinations aren't a symptom of mental illness. Experts don't know exactly what causes them, but they know they aren't a cause for concern. And that just kills me.
Well, that's WebMD. That's doctors. Oh, they're nothing.
We don't know what it is.
Nothing to see here, people.
Nothing to see here. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
It's so prevalent in the field too. People just whitewash it or discount it, and they're not realizing that people are suffering. Real life events are occurring, and these hallucinations are independent entities. They're independent of the individual. It's happening to them, right? And I think that just goes to show you how we like to kind of play things down and sweep it under the rug, because many people don't want to admit that humanity, for the most part, is ignorant regarding this phenomenon. You know what I mean? But, you know, that was my experience. And I've had case studies in my own research and my own work where especially women seem to be the majority of their victimology. Even through biblical antiquity, ancient prehistory, women were their focal point. Women. And I think that if speaking as the hybridization program and the dream states, all of these are tools that these beings are implementing to use the woman as a mortal portal.
Right.
And it's troubling. I don't like it at all.
I like that. That's some good terminology there. What were some examples of say, biblical or ancient examples of the phenomena?
Joanne Scurlock wrote an academic paper called Baby Snatchers. She was talking about Lamashtu and the male counterpart to her. And what we saw are historical records and ritual bowls and pictographs of women who were pregnant. And during their pregnancy, they were experiencing an entity. They called it Lamashtu. An entity would descend down upon her in the middle of the night and stare directly into her eyes and then take the baby. Missing. Literally, it's gone. And so what began to take place, this is really sad because it tells us where we are, groping in the darkness. What these women started doing is they would create a second face and wear it as a necklace, a second face right about here. So in the hopes that when they go to bed at night and as they're sleeping, when that entity crawls into their bed and looks into their eyes, that they'll look into the decoy face and not their actual eyes. So meaning the next morning they still have their baby inside of them.
Wow.
That's what she does, the baby snatcher.
To go to those lengths to do that, it's really scary. Very terrifying.
Yeah, because again, we don't know what we're dealing with. And that was just literally the best thing they could come up with, and it still didn't work. But again, this looking into the eyes behavioral pattern is not new. It's not foreign to the literature. Like I tell people, the Apocrypha of John, it's a commentary on Genesis chapter 6. Same thing. They stared into the eyes of these women as they inseminated them. So there's something involved with either the optic nerve, like David Jacobs says, or what, like I say, behind the eyes, the brain, the medial frontal orbital cortex. There's something in the eyes that they can hack into our brains with and create a visual optical performance where what we're seeing is what's not really occurring to us. And
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, when people look each other in the eyes, there's a feeling that you get instantly. We were talking about moose recently. That's like one of the things when you encounter a moose, which almost looks like a prehistoric animal if you've never seen one. They're very large. They can mess you up.
Yeah.
They say don't look into the eyes of the moose. There's just some kind of connection is made.
Slowly,
brain to brain, creature to creature, when that occurs.
Yeah.
Even gorillas. If you stare into their eyes, they take it as dominance. You're challenging them to a battle. That's
what the moose do too.
Right.
Yeah.
So whatever's going on, and I tell this in almost every show because I can't beat this drum hard enough. They're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game. They have a different currency. They have a different belief system. They have a different value system than we do. And I think that now, as we're stepping into modernity and we're reading more case studies and whatnot, we're starting to see what they value. And it's certainly not what we do. They do not care about things we love.
So what's
They're completely different.
What's their end game to all of this? I'm curious.
Let's look at their capabilities. Betty Luca was told by the entities that her children were going to die. She went to Ray Fowler, told him this in tears, and sure enough, they died. So they have foreknowledge, right? They have resurrection abilities. Her cat died. They buried this black cat. A week later, her neighbor brings the black cat to her, same markings, same collar and everything. It was her cat. I mean, by every definition, I know.
It's like Pet Cemetery.
Yeah.
So their characteristics, at least their abilities, it does fit into the blueprint of what our ancient ancestors considered to be demons. Not that they are demons, but in terms of shared abilities, they do share the same capabilities as what we would consider to be demons. They know when people are going to die. They've told people this. They've threatened death. We have case studies where one gentleman was in almost a fatal car wreck. He leaves his body, and out of body he meets these entities. And these entities tell him in no uncertain terms, your body's dying. You have maybe an hour. And your doctors can't fix you. We can. We'll put you back into your body and you'll live, but you got to become our prophet and do what we want you to do.
Oh, that's so hard sell right there. What do we do?
Right. Are they the creators of death?
Good
right.
Question.
Are they okay, so look at it this way. In the hybridization program, we've always focused solely on the fetus aspect. We've never even asked the question of if they're actually harvesting and hatching consciousness to take.
Exactly. Right. So it's not just necessarily about the physical body of the fetus. And I think when we talk about things like cattle mutilations, a lot of times, the insinuation is maybe there's something they need to come here, something they need to fix in their own physical bodies, whatever that may be, to be here. But when we're talking about the fetus missing, there's another aspect, and it's consciousness. Well, what becomes of the consciousness? And consciousness really is kind of like the soul in a way, right? It's kind of the thing that it makes us more than just a collection of cellular, puzzles, if you will, putting them together and, walking around.
And I've thought about it that a lot, Chris. I mean, if you're literally creating a fetus and then waiting for the consciousness or soul to be in it, then that means that when you're taking the fetus, you're taking the consciousness too.
Right.
See, we've always thought that the baby is dead and then they take it. What if that's not the case? See, everything's on the table here, and we've got to pay attention.
Sure. It's like a classic vampire movie, really, if you look at it, because, that's what happens, right? And you look at an old school, say, Vincent Price movie, which we love, these kind of movies, they go and they're almost hypnotized and mesmerized, and they seem to lose their consciousness. They're no longer the person they thought they were. They're now, working with the vampire or sorcerer of that town, and just have no mind of their own or will, which seemed like a big fear in that day,
Yeah, possession does play a role in that, and I think that we need to clarify what possession is. A lot of people in the field, they think, they look at possession through a Catholic lens, as if they're, that's the only kind of possession that's ever existed, and that's not true. There's other, monotheistic religions that have their own take on it. But possession, and this just gets into another topic, possession has always been the commandeering of consciousness, where I have to take you, put you aside, and then possess your body, right? And so I think that if we get into these ancient texts, even the debunk phenomenon of the 16th century, it is the missing fetus syndrome. But we were never taught that. Getting back to the dream demons, these entities were manifesting to women, inducing them into dream states. And the woman is confused. I think it's just a dream, which makes the consent aspect of it easier because, hey, listen, we'll have a good time. I'll wake up the next day. It's just a dream.
That's it, right?
Right. And that's the propaganda that they like to promote. It's just a dream. It's not a big deal. However, the women the next day would wake up and consciousness would now begin them. They would have different memories. This is fascinating. They would have shared memories. And so you would have somebody who says like this, I remember being in Paris. I remember it, but I've never been in Paris. And so that entity that stepped into them it was almost like you had a war of consciousness going on where their shared memories were occurring. So the woman would essentially say, I have memories of experiencing something that I never experienced. What they were doing is the memories that they were understanding came from the entity that's possessed them. Oh, this is good. It's fascinating, right?
It is.
And then as they're wrestling through going through the archival records of, okay, what do I remember being, this person? Because that's not you. That's the entity's identity. That's the entity's belief system. And so both consciousness are in the same body. Now, it progressed. So not only were these women possessed by consciousness, but they were also pregnant with a fetus at the same time, to the point that they were going to the exorcist, and the exorcists were performing what's called the lavouche. It's a pregnancy test, where they would go and they would check the pulse of the possessed woman, and there would be 2 heartbeats in the same body. Two pulses in the same body. And when the consciousness left them, so did the fetus it had possessed. So again, this speaks to it being more than just a missing fetus syndrome. Literally, and I tell people this all the time, they're using us to self-replicate their species.
So their species, not ours.
Right. Yeah. Right. They're not doing it for us.
Yeah, no, certainly not. And if two consciousness can, in fact, inhabit a body, well, there's a way for them to move about, and certainly move about our society. I had a small experience in this. I don't really talk about it on the show. I don't even know if I talked to you about it in private, but I can tell you it's a very real thing. Kristen knows. And, it was short-lived. And I mean, we're talking about a half an hour all told. That feeling, it's a scary feeling. And you are not totally in control of all your thoughts and actions.
I'm surprised he was aware of it at the moment, too. He was aware of it. So they looked good.
He got very, very angry. I wanted to leave and hurt people.
There's other things that went along.
It was very, very serial killer. In retrospect, it reminded me of what a serial killer may feel like to do the kind of damage. And I didn't hurt anybody. Nothing bad happened. It was all self. But boy, I'll tell you,
emotions.
And it had to do with data and obsession.
Yes.
Right. One of the things, stages of possession over some of the things we were working with at the time. This is a while back. And, I'm a little embarrassed by it, to be honest with you, but I'll tell you, frankly, it happens. It's real. And it changes your own perceptions. Right.
Yeah, because you have an alien entity dominating your thoughts. I was thinking about this earlier, and not to get into, ufology or anything, but why is it that we have pilots flying and they're evading a UAP and they say this in their own head? This is fascinating too. I'm going to relocate my aircraft to this location. And then when they get to that location, the UFO's there waiting. Why? I'll tell you why. Because they did not author that thought. that entity, the occupant in the UFO, authored that thought. And so it's lit, right? That's how it knew, I think. That's how they knew where to rendezvous at. Right? They authored it. That's my hypothesis. So possession plays a dominating role in this phenomenon. It tells us what we're perceiving, how we're perceiving it. It's that part of our brain, like I said, the medial frontal orbital cortex, right behind our eyes. It's that portion of our brain that tells us that movies, the theater, whether or not what we're watching is real.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think that plays a great role in possession cases, where I can trick you into believing whatever I want you to believe.
Right.
And that's scary.
With all this going on, you have to wonder what the government standpoint is on it and what gets pushed. And Greg Koss, our buddy, put out here, he asked why would they have shared their technology, and he followed that up with, wasn't there a trade-off government-wise? Do you think there is? Because there seems to be so many facets of government. There's a whole history of denial and lies, starting with like things like Project Blue Book and maybe before that, to our modern day thing of like naming ATIP, giving it like 4 different acronym names.
It was 7 different acronyms.
7. Thank you.
The media could never get it right.
Kristen is wonderful for checking that out. 7 different ones. Right. So you can you file a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request, but you can get the name right, and they just deny it. There was a whole nother name behind the scenes anyways.
Right.
With respect to a trade-off, I think that even in Mesopotamia, when people would perform sorcery to get information, preternatural information, access to insights that we would have never had because of our human frailty and our condition. It's the same phenomenon. At some point in time, they're going to come knocking on our door, and they're going to want something from us, and that's the trade-off. What is it going to cost us to get insights from that dimension? Even with Jack Parsons, who was one of the creators of our rocket program, he was performing rituals and getting insights and to a scientific method. But in his diary, he told them specifically, in no uncertain terms, when I die, I believe they're going to take my soul. And so while he was getting these incredible revelations, at the same time, it was costing him. And I think that's a great warning to us as a species. Sure, they'll let us look into them, but it's only on their permission and on their terms. But when it comes to them looking into us, we can't stop them. Think about that. They have to give us permission, but they can walk through our walls anytime they want to. So we are at a great disadvantage, even if we get technology from them. And that's where I stand. I mean, what's it going to cost us, right? And I think even now, when we have Travis Taylor out there performing rituals in New Mexico, rituals of esotericism, even at Wright Pat down the street from where I live, they were performing the Parsons technique and actually materializing metallic objects and technologies. I don't care about that. What I'm more worried about is what's going to happen when they come knocking on our door. What are they going to want in exchange for the smallest portion, right, of their knowledge? And, yes, it'll be a trade-off, but what are they going to be after when it comes our turn to give them something? I don't know.
I don't know.
Right.
I said, do you think that's their end game? Like I had asked before. I mean, if you don't know what we're dealing with, then we don't know what the heck's going to happen. Like you said, you're waiting for them. We are to knock on their door. Absolutely not. We don't want that. Do you think that we were, let's see how to put this, like zoo theory, we were made for them to basically feed off maybe the consciousness?
Well, this gets back to the human attributes of their existence, because they know us genetically, biologically, intimately, psychologically. They know our memories. They know our thoughts. Right. Who would have that much access to us as a species if they did not create us, or if they were not first human?
That's good. Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, the psychology is it's the psychological warfare is seemingly human, and the way they can dominate us, the way they want to. The farm theory is very interesting, and Dr. Carla Turner was a great proponent of that. But it does bleed into this question I get asked often. Well, why don't they just destroy us all if they're a threat? Well, duh. That's like telling a cattleman, why don't you kill all your cattle? Because that's not what he's after. He's after replication. And his victimology will go and kill certain cattle, but he's got to keep the species alive and replicating for him to get access to what he's after.
Yeah, sort of a human GMO, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, whatever we're dealing with here, if we look at the implications, it's startling. What did they know? The more accurate question should be, what did they not know? Because they're dominating us in every fathomable way. I mean, there's a researcher out there who was during an exorcism, he was encountering this being that had possessed a woman. And he said in his mind, this is baloney. And as soon as he did, that entity looked at him right in the eyes. And in perfect melee said, I was there when your father killed himself. I was the one that made him pull the trigger. Who would have that access to that?
Now,
Right?
in the movies, we have to like know their name. They say their name. They could be. Is that like a religious thing? I mean, how?
It is. But again, we cannot. Much of that is Catholic. And they get that from the New Testament when Yeshua or Jesus asked them, "What is your name?" But that is a reference to the book of Isaiah, chapter 65, where Yahweh mentions necromancers. And it's a prophecy. And he says, I will name you and I will number you, and you will bow down and worship me. And so that's why when Yeshua or Jesus steps off the boat to the Gadarenes, he fulfilled this prophecy. The person comes to them possessed, he's a necromancer, possessed by these entities. What is your name? He names them. And then they said, we're legion, which is a number, which he numbers them. Incredible. Incredible. So whatever they are, it does seem to be that they have their own belief systems, they have their own values, and they know us intimately as a species. That's where we're at. We can call them demons, but it's still an incomplete answer.
Right. And that demon word has been used for a very, very long time. Dating back to these sort of Anunnaki times or Mesopotamian or what have you, and is carried forth. And now we're looking at it, and it's the same phenomena that we're seeing there that we see in these kind of uncontrollable forces in ufology. Right.
And I think that people need to realize the role that these demons played in antiquity, like even with Pazuzu. This is fascinating. That entity originated through an amulet. So what happened was, if you had a haunting or had a malevolent spirit in your house, you would go to an artificer of metal, a blacksmith. And what they were doing is they would say, I want you to create me a Pazuzu. And they would create a metallic image of a deity or an entity. They would then take that metallic image, place it in their home. While they're in bed at night, that entity, this is going to blow your minds, would crawl out of the amulet, out of the statue, and into this dimension.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
So again, we're looking at mortal portals here. And I tell people all the time in my lectures, especially dealing with belief systems and how these beings operate, because the Pazuzu, in order to exist in this world, it had to mold the mind of that individual long before that individual molded Pazuzu as a statue, right?
Right.
So here's the image in my mind that I think he looks like, and so I'm going to create it. And then in the midnight hour, that entity stretches out, looks around, and now it's in this world. Woo! So the mortal portal exists, and we need to pay close attention to that. So I think that's fascinating. It existed. It was almost like it used that statue as a womb in which to be born into this world.
Wow.
All right. That makes you wonder about the nature of inspiration in general, right? I've often thought that inspiration comes, we have, from things that, outside of us that do
Yes.
something.
Right.
You're mute.
Not necessarily for nefarious means. Like when we're talking about, say, a serial killer and the pathology there and what it might do and collect and those sort of things, but also in just creating a great work of art. The muse, if you will, seems to come from somewhere else.
Exactly right. And this is why Yahweh in the Bible told them, don't you get in contact with these entities, right? Don't contact them. Don't conjure them. Don't even go to them for information. Because these, again, they're not just tricksters. They have a serial killer pathology in the sense that when you're sitting across from a serial killer, he has a different morality than you, a different belief system. And at any moment, he can turn into a predator that you've never seen the likes of before in your life.
Right.
This is why Yahweh was dealing with people who wanted to transcend the microcosm of mortality and get insight into the next dimension. What was happening, and even now, and what's always happened, is again, you'll contact them or we'll contact them, and they'll allow themselves to be accessible to us. They'll give us tidbits and propaganda. They'll tell us propaganda, and they'll give us illusions and fallacies. And we'll believe in all those things. Meanwhile, something is working on us. Something. It's not just that we're experiencing them, but we are being experienced by them too.
Right.
And so Yahweh said, I need you to cut it out. Now, this goes back into Edward Kelly and John Dee. Yes, they had access to an Enochian language. Yes, they had a beautiful handmaid in the mirror. However, when that entity told them to swap wives, and they did, then that entity completely did a flip, a 180, and laughed at them, and then shut all communication off. So
it's more like for his pleasure,
Right, or amusement,
what's really going on?
Maybe to feel the human experience. That's another angle too. You wonder about that, and as far as like possession and what it is like. Maybe this 3D world, Matrix, whatever it is, does appear to be sort of like a playground, like riding a roller coaster or something. Like, hey, come in here, and this is what it's like to be human. I'm used to not having this, and the idea of linear time. It might be such a different concept that it's a thrill. Or maybe there's some thrills.
That's very interesting. Yes, sir. Let me throw this at you real quick. This is a subject that I'll probably talk about on my show next week. In antiquity, there was what was called ghost-born illnesses. Think about that. So the idea was that the disincarnate, when they possess someone, that the person they're possessing will carry the same illness that person did in their life. All right. That's why in exorcisms, and the first exorcists were physicians, because when they're performing their rituals, right, they're not just cursing the spirit, they're cursing the illnesses that spirit has created in that individual, right? And then when they remove the entity, the illness leaves with it. This is a whole nother level of research.
Yeah, it's a different game in a way. Yeah.
Right. So, again, are we dealing with the disembodied? Are we dealing, which I personally believe that. Because I believe they're formerly human and that they're in the afterlife and they're using what they've learned in the afterlife against us. That's my hypothesis.
That's interesting.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. They've always been here, at least as long as we have. So, it makes sense that they were us once. That certainly is a possibility for sure. It's just weird. When you do these sort of paranormal investigations and research, you come across a wide variety of things, and then they're not, as publicized, not necessarily all evil. A lot of them are positive beings, or maybe trapped beings, or misunderstood. Maybe it's their own memories that are keeping them held in this sort of in-between place. And we also have the ability to talk, with the deceased that maybe come back with a good message or something like that, where it's like a relative or something. We certainly hope so. I think our problem is like, what's the filter, right? Like, how do we know?
Right.
Greg says,
Right.
you're glad I have my guides. And I totally agree with you, Greg. You know this. And, you know, I'm into spirit guides. I love this concept, but yeah, exactly. We are. I got to stop that. There could be something that talks to me in a very similar fashion. And how am I to distinguish between,
Correct.
you know, this being a relative,
right,
or something that maybe has ill intent?
Right. Who's wearing that mask as a role to step into. And even more terrifying, guys, let's think about this for a fleeting moment. If it's not my dear Aunt Edna, how does it have access to her memories, her language preference, and her belief systems? Think about that. Dear Aunt Edna's deceased, but this entity knows everything about her life, can pick out a memory and talk to you for hours in her language, use the same terminology, same belief system. Heck, she'll even talk about the recipes that she used on Thanksgiving. So if it's not her, we have a significant issue that is a profundity to a T. What?
Yeah, we agree. Stepping into role.
Stepping into role. And maybe they're pulling it from us, right?
Yeah.
This information. We've got it all stored here. And like you said, you know, in the frontal cortex, staring in the eyes, and we don't even know what we're looking at.
Right.
They could be looking into our soul. As they say, a window to the soul is our eyes. There might be a reason for this, right?
It's a question, I mean, that we have, because it's like, how do they know our names? We don't even tell them our names when we go in. They just, it's the first thing normally after we walk in there, first thing we do, they say our names. We're like, okay. And we're not even talking to them yet. So it's weird. It's very weird. And it happens in almost every place. So how do they know our names? So
we haven't introduced ourselves. And then right there, you know, hey, Kristen.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. You know, I get that a lot. And why? I don't know. It's because we're open to it. We don't know why that is.
That's what we think.
But we think they have to be taking it from us somehow. Right. There's something they see. Maybe they see a whole timeline of our lives. You know, maybe our past, our present, and our future are all kind of combined into one, I don't know, kaleidoscope of things that they can look at, sort of like a Viewmaster. You know, click, what's the next picture? There it is. You know?
That's a good point. You know, it points to the fact that they don't have to hack eternity to have this knowledge. All they have to do is hack us. Yeah,
that's very true. That's very well said.
It's just like with that one researcher, I won't name him, but, you know, he talks about that. You know, they knew when my dad died, that entity could have very well was just, you know, pulled that memory out and then used it to beat him with, and abuse him emotionally. But, you know, again, everything's on the table. I think that, you know, demonology is an incomplete answer to an already incomplete question. Do I believe that they're extraterrestrial? No. I think that they've told us that. But they've also told us, you know, they're demons. They've also told us they're angels. They've told us they're the deceased, right? The scariest thought that I've been having as of late is, what if there is something in the shadows that's playing the role of everything else, but it's not? Like, we literally have yet to have a vocabulary to articulate what that is that's dwelling in the darkness. That's terrifying if you think about it.
It is. It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. And, you know, as far as them being extraterrestrial, one of the more interesting things that has come up on the show and others that I hear is like, all right, if we have these UFO sightings all the time, and I think Steve Mera, great paranormal researcher out there for many, many years, says this, you know, why do we not see them leaving, you know, coming and going? Why is there not a super highway, you know, coming from outer space to our inner space? And while some things might come through, there are sightings every few seconds being reported.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure a great deal of them are explainable, et cetera, et cetera. However, there seems to be so much more phenomena than you see, you know, traversing our atmosphere. The math doesn't add up, right? So,
right.
Kind of like you were saying,
they're already
portal or
here, right?
Right. There's some portal, and I don't like germ, but
it's, you know, again, but we're looking for correct vocabulary. We are groping in the darkness as a species, but I always tell people, man, like, they're present with but absent from.
Yeah.
And it's a dichotomy. I got it. But hey, listen, that's about the best explanation. That's where we are. You know, and I'll tell you what keeps me up at night is it's not the unexplainable things. It's the things that they're doing that I've given a prosaic explanation to. It's the phenomenon that exists and we have an answer for it. That's what I'm worried about, because what if that's not what we think it is? What if it's them, right? And we're just giving it a prosaic explanation and moving on because, hey, it fits the bill, we're done.
Exactly.
So whatever we're dealing with, it has a profound amount of control over us, our perceptions of it. And so right now what we're doing is we're in a sifting mode, or we're sifting the propaganda that's coming out, right?
Right.
What if they told us that we believed that was a complete lie?
What are your thoughts on Skin Rancher? Going there, bringing up this very point.
Yeah.
There are people who say, okay, the money, $22 million given by our government, Harry Reid, to
Bob Bigelow,
to like investigate Skinwalker, and they really turned up nothing. They were apparently faking some reports, blah, 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 nothing going on. And then you talk to the next person, and it's like, whoa, there's all this stuff going on.
What's it called? The Dino Beaver?
Dino Beaver, right? Reports of the Dino Beaver. Silly things.
The dog men smoking cigarettes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yeah.
Well, I think both or two things can be true at the same time. Do I believe that there was a lot of propaganda coming out of there? Absolutely. Bigelow was telling people not to dig into the dirt because it triggers the phenomenon. Come to find out, he did not own the mineral rights to the property. So you're not going to dig. He's not allowed to, right? Does it make sense?
Yes, it does.
So there was a lot of it that, he was kind of skirting the issue, but that doesn't negate that the phenomenon exists there. I think we have too many personal testimonies. We have, like, Barry Fitzgerald was there in 2019. He encountered some phenomenon there. So, some of the shoddiest researchers have been there. But then again, some of our best researchers, like Fitzgerald and others, have went there and they have monitored and recorded the phenomenon. So that's my point on it. But I would love to visit it. I'd love to go there and hang out for a couple nights. As long as I don't get haunted or anything.
Yeah. But it's just weird how it just like you said, the propaganda just came out with and that one book, and it was from I think I sent you the link, Kristen. It was from about
Skinwalkers from Washington, something like that.
Yeah, it was just how it came out. George Knapp and some other guy did it, and he was a scientist there for Bob Bigelow, and he's just made things up. And people are now, they're running with it. And I'm like, dudes, stuff. Even the authors are saying that stuff was made up. So,
it's not the first time that's happened in the field.
It is.
Right. It's not, but I mean, like, Beaver, come on.
The Dino Beaver.
People are running with it. I'm like, no.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah. All right. Can't go through a show.
It's a common element in the field. I mean, even as an academic researcher, at a university, they're going to want to be financed. They need financed. And so sometimes people may cut corners, but at the end of the day, what university is going to be financing is their research. So there is a there, right? It just may not necessarily be as, wild and theatrical as what they say.
Right.
Yeah. Or maybe it's worse, and they're burying it.
Yeah.
It depends on the people there.
Yeah.
Joshua Dixon said he's blind. I don't understand. Are you really blind?
Well, he also mentioned that we all exude an aura, and they can immediately pick up on it. And there may be some truth to that. A lot of people read auras, that sort of thing. They can see the energies around us, and maybe that is kind of the pathway that an entity or something other than non-human, mortal human, mortal portal can read this sort of information from us, take it from us. I know there are reports of abductees saying aliens actually told them, I am showing you myself because I am pulling it from you and your memories and what you expect it to look like. It's almost like a permission-based thing. You can take a group of paranormal investigators, put them in a quote-unquote haunted house, and 10 people are standing there. 3 of them see the apparition on the stairs. The other 7 don't even see it. It's almost like permission is given to, all right, I can see this, or they had some kind of quality about them that they were open to that frequency, if it is,
Mm-hmm.
or vibration, to see that apparition.
Yeah, and this gets back to the single source hypothesis. You know, they're all the same entity, they're all the same phenomena. Because even in ufology, Dr. Colin Turner had a case where a family of like 4 or 5 people were in a car on a highway, and the highway stops. Everybody's looking up at this UFO hovering above the cars. Well, she's talking to the family. Only 3 of the 5 saw the actual ship. And only 2 of the 3 agreed on what it looked like.
Yeah.
What is going on, you know? So that's where we're at. We don't know what we don't know. And there are 3 levels of knowledge. There's the known, the unknown, and the unknowable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm tempted to say tonight is that, yes, they'll allow us to know certain things, but perhaps there are things that will forever remain unknowable to us because they're keeping it under lock and key.
I agree.
Right?
I agree, definitely.
It's a terrifying thought.
Mm-hmm. Other people, they have their own opinions, but I agree with what you're saying there. But you?
I agree. Absolutely. You know,
from knowing what we know now, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the research is going? Like what's next level from what we're doing today? I don't think we can walk around with just these blinky toys and, you know, figure it all out because there's an EMF spike. And, well, we experiment with those things and I like to.
Well, there are experiments.
What's next? You know, what kind of explorations can you do in consciousness? The thing that we have such a hard time defining.
Oh, well, I think that some of the best researchers are in academia. They just don't know it, right? So your best demonologists are in academia, you know, because they're studying the phenomenon in ancient history and whatnot. So what we need, though, is specifically speaking, we need doctors to come forward with the data. We need more John Macks that are willing to risk their reputations in the field to come forward and say, hey, listen, you know, there's something to this. We need gynecologists to come forward and say, listen, we're noticing fetal tissue in virgins. What's going on here, right? We need them to come forward and say, listen, we have evidence. We just want to share it with the community. We don't have that. We don't have researchers who are gynecologists, you know, who are noticing this. They're separate. So we need to at least, especially in the field, we need to professionalize, if that's a word, I don't think it is. We need to make ourselves more professional and more appetizing to them, right? And instead of, you know, just going out there and saying everybody's a demonologist, everybody's a ghost hunter, they're not going to respect that because not everybody's an academic. And so what has to happen is we have to present it in such a way that it'll be attractive to them so that we can have an intellectual discussion that's honest. Does it make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense.
Total sense.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about like pregnancy without sex. Of course, I mean, Mary comes to mind, but there's actually a longer history of this, right? And a lot of it revolves around the same dates on the 25th of December, and this sort of thing of, you know, this God-like intervention comes in, and then suddenly, you know, someone is pregnant to give birth to a Messiah, a prophet. Well, why? Why the prophet? Why the, you know, the non-sex thing happening? Why was this a virgin? And
yeah, we have in succubi literature, it's crazy. We have even in the abduction phenomenon, it's the same stuff. It's just different terms. Where a man is abducted, and they give him a child, and they say, "Hey, listen, this is yours," and the man's a virgin. Or, you ready for this? His sexual orientation's different. He's never been with a woman. Think about that, guys. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
And so they're realizing, hey, there's a problem here. This is why in antiquity, your Hebrew mythologists came out against the Lil spirit, Lilith, who would take the seed from a man and then go inseminate a woman with it. So it's cultural, it's religious, it's been occurring. And I think that what we've done now is we've placed different terminologies on it. It's no longer demonic, now it's alien.
Right. Right.
Right? It's no longer larva like it was in the medieval period. Now it's a hybrid.
Right. Different terminology for it. It's all the same.
Same thing. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, people like to pigeonhole things. It's almost like a characteristic of being human. We need to pigeonhole and put things in their little respective boxes for it to make sense to our, you know, our feeble human brains.
Right.
You know, but some of these things aren't, you know, so easily categorized.
Right. They limit the phenomenon. You know, and a lot of that has to do with dogma, because if we can clarify it, classify it, put it in a box, then it makes us more comfortable with it. But they're outside of the box. They've obliterated the box. They're a completely different world now.
Yeah, most definitely.
I agree. Bob Burnell said, all of a sudden, the Matrix does not seem so far-fetched.
Yeah.
You know?
It
Right.
doesn't.
I don't know.
Aspects of reality.
Yep. We don't even really know what it is, reality. It's
Right.
just go by
It's what
our
we most
day
remember.
to day. Yeah.
We don't know that our, you know,
Isn't it?
dream state isn't the reality, and that our waking state is
Right.
the dream. How do we really know? It's just the thing we, you know, in this consciousness, this shade of who we are, it is the thing we most remember. But for all intents and purposes, in a dream state, if you don't not aware and having a vivid dream or a lucid dream, I guess I should say, where you know that you're having a dream, you wake up in it and manipulate it. It's the same thing. You know, you're you know, in the room with monster, whatever it is, or you know, you're at work. A lot of times I have these really boring dreams, and you know, getting ready. It's like some part of me knows I've got to get up and work, and I'll start dreaming.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, that sucks. I hate that, man.
it's like doing it twice. What?
You just had an 8-hour shift in a dream. Now you got to clock in when you wake up. I had a really wild dream that really kind of tests that theory of, you know, is that reality or not? This happened years ago. The first dream, I remember walking out of a house in a neighborhood, and then walking on the sidewalk, and I walk up to a youth group that were standing outside of a house, and they were looking up at a second-story window, and I guess they were a church youth group, because they acknowledged me, and I'm looking at them as this man is baptizing somebody. Like, you know, they had like a tub or something. They're baptizing somebody through the upstairs window, and we're all watching it. I introduced myself. How you guys doing? What's about? Oh, you know, we're from this such church and everything. I said, okay. Anyways, I walk back into the house. I wake up. Years later, I go to sleep, and I've had thousands of dreams since then, you know. Well, all of a sudden, this dream occurred again. I walk out of the same house, same neighborhood, and I walk over, and there's that same youth group outside, but there's no baptism now. They're just hanging outside playing volleyball and stuff. And I walk up to them, and they've aged.
Oh, my goodness.
They have aged.
Wow.
And one of them greeted me by name and said, "We haven't seen you in a little bit, man. How you been?"
Wow. That's like, I know we'd see you again.
Yeah.
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 So,
Wow.
you know, that's freaky, dude. That's freaky.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, because they aged according to the time that I last saw them. You know, they didn't age 10 years, they aged 3, because it was been only 3 years since I had the dream. So what's really going on here? But I think it's worthy of pursuing. Who are we when we're out of body? Who are we when we're dreaming? We have ancient texts that describe the soul leaving the body at nighttime, right? And I think that's a whole nother show, but maybe that does play a role into it, where we step out of body, but into that dimension, where that dimension is shared by other beings and other humans. I don't know.
And perhaps we exist in more than one plane. I mean, and Kristen and I both had dreams where we woke up where we had the distinct feeling that it wasn't a dream we were in, but like another timeline. It was almost like that word timeline was ringing in my head. And
Mine too.
you know, right toward the end of the dream, I saw the layout of my house, and I knew that, you know, it was here. It was the same thing, but it was not here. It was not in this state or wherever. It was not on this piece of property, but the layout was the same. I know all these things. I'm like, I have this exact same life, well, within walls similar to these, maybe colored differently or whatever, but somewhere else. And, you know, so maybe I visited sometimes. Maybe it's like a twin brother out there having, you know, some sort of, you know, life that I'm not aware of, but we're connected in some way. I can see it. I get a chance to peer in once and again.
Yeah, step into that dimension, then step back into ours. But what if it, like I said before, what if the dream state is a bridge between worlds, or I mean, not even worlds, right? Because when we say worlds, we're thinking, okay, that's a planet. This is a planet. Dimensions.
Right.
What if it is a room that's right next to ours?
Yeah.
In existence. I'm sorry, yeah.
No, I was going to say
know.
that's perfect. We don't know, but I believe that. I don't know about Chris, but I think that's what it is.
No, I think it's very possible. It could be right
open
here
a window or something.
in the same space that we live in now, but just vibrating at a different frequency.
Exactly.
Existing, and we just don't see it. Our limited scope of what perception is, which is extremely limited.
Right.
No, just doesn't recognize it.
To go with Joshua Dixon's comment about that, we have, I think it's 37. We only use 30% of, I'll be right. 37% of our eyes, our optical, what happens if we use 38 or 40? What are we going to see on that? In the frequency, the vibration.
Sure.
Can you imagine that? Is it going to be them? Since they see us? I don't know.
Right. The world only exists in our brain.
Right.
Maybe it does.
True. Brilliant point.
Sure.
It goes back to the creator of the mirror.
Right.
Yeah, this is fascinating. See, what we see in a mirror is not us. There was a man that created a real mirror that he switched it. And so now, instead of it being flipped when we look at the mirror, you actually see yourself for what other people see you as. It's correct. It's a correct manifestation of who you are. Because when you look at mirrors, you're switched. Yeah. So that's not really you. It's flipped. And so we've lived our entire lives thinking that's what I look like, and it's not at all. Right? But I'll tell you what's really interesting. When I was growing up, there used to be a guy that would come to my old church. Really, really, really powerful guy. He was very, very sick, and I think it was Calcutta, and deathly ill. And he was praying for help. And he said that in the middle of the night, he said it was like a window opened up in his hotel room, and his best friend walked through it. And his best friend prayed for him and gave him some word of what they call word of knowledge, encouragement. And he said out of the window, it was like another world. I saw things walking by and flying by and occurring. And he said when that, whatever it was, angel, being, guide, whatever was done, it just walked through the window and closed it, and it was gone. Right, we know for sure that something exists in that next dimension. And the data suggests that these beings exist there too, or at least they exist in one of their dimensions. Their knowledge of that dimension is incredible. Their foreknowledge is incredible. Their ability to understand the soul and pull the soul out. Yeah. I guess I'm going to use God helmet. Yeah. Lou Alzado. It's just a God helmet. Okay, Lou. All right, buddy. Yeah, they're putting helmets on every abductee. Okay. But, that's where we are. But it is a threat to us. I mean, anytime, like, it's somebody who doesn't know mathematics. Like, what if we were ignorant of mathematics, and then there's an Einstein out there that's using it against us? Imagine that.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
I don't think the message is always good. No. It's not to say there can't be a good message, but I find it awfully curious that the good, we're here to help humanity message is so pushed by seemingly everybody in the field, almost everybody.
Right.
What do you think about projects like, say, Avi Loeb and the Galileo project going on at Harvard?
I think the scientific method has to be pursued. I'm not one of these guys that are, solely demonological and, I'm not just anthropological in my research. I believe the scientific method does have something to offer. However, I think that the table has to be set, and we have to have both components there. We have to have the research in demonology, research in hauntology, ufology, and we need Avi Loeb's work in pursuing the unknown and, through the scientific method. So we have to have everybody there having an intimate intellectual conversation where everybody respects everyone. But the field is so exclusive. We have ufologists that laugh at demonology.
Yeah, it's silly. Everybody
because
needs
they're gods.
to work
Like,
together. It's silly.
it's
Oh,
ignorant. It's
yeah,
ignorant.
we have to
It is.
stop the pigeonholing, right? And
Right.
recreating the scientific method is just so difficult. And that's where, like, you know, parapsychologists start to look down on the paranormal investigators,
Yeah.
and they're looked down within their own realm.
Oh, it's
They're not
incredible.
really pulling off the scientific mythology, but they're trying. You know, it's so hard to do. You know, this came up the other night. We were talking about it. We've got this skull there behind us there, and I've got a giant magnet in the thing, along with some crystals and certain things to take phenomena, give it the opportunity to maybe just experiment, see if it can play with it, do something with it, expound upon it. And our data showed that night that it did seem to do that. And it did it in this sort of wave-like fashion where EMF would just blow out for a little while.
Yeah.
We started to hear voices in that when that was happening. We had other devices around it recording these kind of waves coming out, and then it would shrink back, and then we wouldn't hear it
Like a
come
burst.
out, and you'd start hearing these whispery voices that were not us. But how do I recreate that in a scientific method, right? So I got to go there at the exact, moon phase, or, that kind of thing. And the same people in the room, same time of day, same day of the year.
Right.
It's impossible to really replicate it. We'll use it. We'll see if the effects seem to be similar, that kind of thing.
Can't really replicate that at that moment in time.
We can't replicate that moment. No, those few minutes.
Yeah.
Very, very strange, very difficult to do that, when you get in outside of physical science and Newtonian laws.
You're right. And what it's done is it's bred an unbridled arrogance in the parapsychological field. I think I've told you my story about reaching out to a parapsychologist. I won't mention his name, but he was a hero of mine. I love him, dude. His work was incredible.
Yeah.
I got out one sentence. I'm a demonologist, love your work. I said, look, I know you don't know me, but I'm a demonologist. I really love your work. You're right. I don't know you.
And that went from your lifelong, mentor to.
I thought, what a joke. Really, what a joke. What a joke.
That was awful.
You're right. I don't know you. And if you know my work, you should know I don't believe in demons. Oh, I'm sorry. We can't. It was so stupid and arrogant. Like, I'm thinking, dude, what?
Right. Salty.
Who are you, bro? And what's so funny is even the scientific community looks at them and think that the way they look at demonologists. It's like, we're all in the same boat here. But the disrespect is real. And I think that, again, is part of that is caused by people who just slap the term. They don't even study demonology. Right. They just go out there and, hey, man, I go out there and quote a couple scriptures and I'm out.
Yeah.
No dedication to the study of the field. They don't care. They just want accolades and, all that. And so I think that, at least he was honest, but there's a saying, never meet your heroes.
Yeah, right. All right, kind of like the Foo Fighters song there Goes My Hero.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of disappointment that happens, I think, in the lyrics of that song. Bob Burnell asks, do you think our government is using television shows such as Skinwalker Ranch to ease society into the fact that aliens exist?
I know that there are certain shows that push their own narrative. When I was growing up, my dad was flying in scholars from Israel and all across the country who have been on Ancient Aliens, who have been on the History Channel. And what was occurring was that they would tell us, I just did this appearance and I watched the actual show, and that's not what I said. They chopped up my sentence, using their name, image, likeness to propagate a theory that individual did not believe at all. So there is a narrative being shaped by television shows.
That was happening to Graham Hancock during that. Yeah. And that's why he comes out all the time and says, I am not a believer in Ancient Aliens in that field, because they were doing that to him.
Absolutely. So do I believe they're framing a narrative? Absolutely. I think that's 100% the case. But, okay, yes. Case in point, to Bob Burnell, absolutely. To answer your question, yes. And here's the proof. Why do we not have incubi cases in these ghost hunter shows?
Very true.
I mean, the phenomenon's occurring. I know it is. Why is it? Right? Why is it always, like just little, oh my God, there's a bump in the night, and we got a couple voices that growl at us. It never gets as real as the data is. It never talks about people who are getting impregnated. It never talks about the remote viewer that I give you a picture of earlier today, because there are dimensions of this reality that are too dark for television. And if it's too dark, they're not going to educate you. They're there to entertain you.
Right.
And what I'm realizing, I told this to my show the other night, was what's even worse is that a lot of experiencers in the field are getting their education from actors. And then when real practitioners or researchers step into their home, what did you do before I got here? Well, I saw this one thing on a television show, and that's what I decided to do. Well, did you know that guy doesn't even believe in the phenomenon? No, I didn't. All right. So it's doing a great disservice in the field because, number one, it's educating and indoctrinating the masses.
Right.
But what we're witnessing is not a correct rendition or representation of what's really occurring in the field.
They're just giving us blips and pieces of what they feel.
Right.
That's right. What's
is necessary.
marketable.
Right. Like Joshua Dixon just said.
That kind of thing. And again,
Popular.
fitting into those pigeonholes of what's to be expected. Because if you go too far out of those pigeonholes, people don't get it.
Anything to make money.
I mean,
Right.
maybe you could market that, but it might be hard to do that in Incubi show every week, right?
Well, it'd be tough. It's never that. Like, again, it's never about education. It's about entertainment. And it's about, aside from because I respect a lot of people. I love Sam Baltrusis. I think he's incredible. He's not one of these guys, right? And I don't think, there's people that I know that we both have been on television. They're great people. I do not consider them in that category, right? They're amazing. I believe what they're doing is educational 100%. But that there does exist a group of people who, they'll sign contracts and they'll say, okay, we're going to govern our content according to the appetites of pop culture. And people think that's educational. Like, oh my God, that's really occurring. How does one guy get possessed by the same old woman every case? Right? It doesn't even make any sense.
No.
So, we have to be honest with the data and we have to look at it for what it is. If you want to get into what's really occurring, get into literature. Trust me, a lot of what I do is not entertaining. It'll keep you up at night.
It's not, and it has.
It has. I know you've come out around to escape some of this research from time to time because it's to clear your head.
Yeah, it's tough.
And I understand. It's like the Ukraine war, right? We've got the flag up there in the corner of the screen. You can see that. Put a little Bigfoot and a bunny on there, but it's Ukraine flag. We've had it up there since that war began. But how much are people taking in about that war? And is it a different perspective if you're sitting in America, you're sitting in Illinois or Tennessee or wherever you might be, as opposed to being on the front lines? It's a totally different thing. It's become passe. We're all looking, what happened to Mar-a-Lago and blah, 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 and all these other things. Whatever the news story is of the day, we can't hold the thought long enough to even see it through. There's atrocities going on every day. But, it's fairly for public consumption. They got to move on from it. Now, Greg Koss had a question he asked a little earlier, and I forgot to put it up. He asked again. He basically is asking you what you do for your own personal protection. If you're on a haunted location or just in general, what do you do to protect yourself?
So let me say this. I grew up in a haunted house. That was my first confrontation with the phenomenon. It was the most benevolent entity I've encountered in my whole career. So I think that I've developed some sort of an immunity towards it. So what do I do to protect myself? Sometimes I pray. Sometimes I literally have to disconnect. I found even with you guys, Chris and Kristen, and he just mentioned this, if I'm getting too deep into the research and the research is getting too deep into me, I'll cancel shows. I'll buy a ticket to Rhode Island and I'll gorge on food, fellowship, and with people I love. Disconnect from it. It'll disconnect from you. That's how I operate. I kind of bleed back into who I was as a child and music. I love movies. That's what I do. I don't really do amulets I'm not one guy that goes in there with a big, large cross. Some dudes, it's not for me. Doesn't mean I don't believe in that. It's just I have different modes of dealing with the heaviness that accompanies my research. There are nights when I can't sleep. It's not because I'm being haunted. It's just, it's thought process, the heaviness, the loneliness, the intimacy of knowledge that I'm sharing with the phenomenon just by researching it.
Right.
Yeah, it brings you closer. I remember we talked to a haunted genealogist. Her name is Natalie Zett, and it was a wonderful interview. And she became haunted by her family's history through the research of it. And as she visited sites and that sort of stuff. But it was like her thought process, in putting it all together and seeing who these people were. And some of them had died tragic deaths and this sort of thing. There were some events.
Right.
It brought it home, like it opened a tunnel to them, and she started to experience real phenomena in her day-to-day life. I know we know from our own experience, and we encountered a certain entity and researched it extensively, and that's where that possession thing came in that I mentioned earlier. Kristen had her own set of issues. Like we were, haunted AF, as they like to say these days. My daughter's still watching. She'll use that acronym because it was on our minds all the time, and there was something to it. It gives it power by thinking about it.
Yes.
And our real solution, we tried all these arcane things to get rid of and banish it. None of it worked.
Nothing.
To stop thinking about it and give it a goddamn put it out of our heads, out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
Detach.
That's it.
It's the real thing.
That is it.
Dude, I had not too long ago, I went through an existential crisis. I had two different people that did not know each other. They watched two different shows I had done. And within 2 or 3 days of each other, I got an email from each of them. And both of them told me, the people that are abducting me have told me specifically that they'll be waiting for you when you die. I lost it. I went to my dad. I'm like, what is this? How do they know this? They don't know each other, presumably. It disturbed me again, because when there's a certain moment when you're so deep into researching them that they notice you. They notice you, and they'll at some point they're going to go after you. They don't want you to discover them in their ways. So I think that to answer the other question, I do think that there is some form of divine protection over me, because I've worked with angels and I've had angelic manifestations. So, I don't really know. I don't really have attachments, because that happens after. Most of the time it happens after you do an investigation or cleansing. I have apparitional manifestations prior to it. It's different, So with me, it fights me mentally. It's not so much phenomenon. It's literally like sometimes it'll affect me mentally, and I'll have to shut everything off, right? And I'll fly out to you guys, and we'll hang out for 3 or 4 days to get everything clear, and then I'll come back to home and do more research. So there's a turning off and a turning on that occurs.
Yeah, so we would feel like Chris said, we definitely need to detach. I mean, that's our thing
You gotta
to do.
just let it go sometimes.
You have to, because
let it go.
You'll end up haunting yourself, and sometimes it's not a good thing.
No.
Right.
No, there's definitely some negative things out there.
Yeah.
And the other side.
It's terrible.
It was one other thing I wanted to cover with you, and I know it's getting late, and I know you've been feeling great. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Taking the time to do this. We love you, man.
I love you too. I hope I didn't ramble too much, man.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Right.
There's one thing I wanted to just kind of hit, and that was scarification.
Yeah, scar.
I got this here. This little slide here, and this is some pictures that you had sent me. I don't know. It's okay to show. We're obviously not going to
go for it.
Anything, but
it's a whole nother show.
pretty interesting. But we just touch on it, and we'll pick it up another time. But this is pretty incredible. And for those of you listening to this as a podcast, There are clear marks on an individual's chest here. You've got the Star of David just outlined twice. There's a cross. There's other sigil-like markings on his chest. He's just covered in marks.
This always gives me chills, man.
Yeah.
It's spooky.
Well, this is why we have to understand our guides. Are they really our guides? Are they really our ancestors? Are they really aliens? Are they really demons? Or are they just playing by different rules here? This particular individual, his son, actually reached out to me. His son had watched a lecture I had given about scarifications in demonology. I had mentioned how Father Sinistrario of Amino was discovering scarifications and symbols underneath people's eyelids. And so I went into that a little bit. And finally, he reached out to me. This guy did and said, hey, listen, can we set up a time to talk on the phone? So I did. He told me a story. He said that my father was a renowned remote viewer, and he would leave his body and he would meet with his guides. And by all measures, it was an out-of-body experience, near-death experience, and an abduction. He said because his father was out of body, but he would enter into a metallic room, and his guides would flank him on the right and the left. They would give him prophecies. And I have other notes of his prophecies that have come true and everything. And then when he would get back into his body, his father would go and call up a local celebrity or the local politician and say, hey, listen, these are the prophecies, and this is what these beings want you to do, and they'll back you and whatnot. He told me one story. He said there were times when my dad would go and do a session. He would come back into his body, and then he would walk downstairs, turn all the lights off, and he would tell me to stop playing video games. There's an entity with me in the room right now, and he wants to communicate with you directly. And so these guides had presented themselves as authority figures and as divine. Now, this particular night, these scarifications occurred. His father had went through an out-of-body experience, the same process he had done so many times before. He had met with his guides, and through that interaction, he realized that these guides are not as benevolent as he would like to believe they are. They had flanked him, but then they started looking at him closely, and suddenly he said they changed their appearance. They no longer look like what they used to look like. And he said at that point, his father was slammed back into his body. And this is from the perspective of the son. He said, I was downstairs when my father's running down the stairs, screaming. He's inconsolable. He's white. He's crying. He's shaking. And he ends up having a massive heart attack.
Oh, my gosh.
And he said, when we got into the hospital, we're taking his shirt off, putting his robe on. And he says, as we're doing that, from underneath his skin, subdermal, from underneath, these religious symbols began to manifest from underneath the skin to the surface of it. God. Now, this is why demonology has to catch up. These religious amulets are exclusive. That is a Jewish Star of David, but that's a cross. You will not have a rabbi employing the cross against these entities. Those are mutually exclusive amulets that belong to two different religions.
Yes, they do.
But that's not what they're doing to us, is it?
Mm-mm.
No, because they're using. God, I got chills.
Yeah, talk about.
Right, they're playing by different rules. Now, they originated subdermally. They were underneath the skin to the surface. We've seen the same phenomenon in hauntology. I had a case where a lady emailed me a picture of her daughter, her arm, because just like this individual, he felt a burning sensation, and then he looked through his skin and saw it moving to the surface. Just like this case study, this little girl was in a haunted house, was being attacked by an entity. The entity scratched her. She felt a burning sensation, and then both her and her mother witnessed underneath the skin, scratches moved themselves to the surface. So we're dealing with something that we're not real sure of.
Right. And then you said that it was underneath his eyelids. How the heck do you mark somebody underneath their eyelids?
Or
So-
yourself, you think they have
You
a
can't really do
psychological condition. Well, that's a pretty intense one because
Yeah.
I can do that to myself.
No.
Sinistrai found that. He was doing autopsies of incubi victims, and they were peeling back the eyelids, and the entity had marked them. This gets back to the serial killer pathology, right?
Definitely.
Because that entity's either marking the bodies for themselves or for someone else, where I'm claiming you as my own.
Yeah.
So what are we dealing with here? Again, there's a connection between the soul and the skin. When he got back into his body, his skin manifested certain conditions, symbols, and whatnot. So even with Betty Luca, her scoop marks, originated only after her soul was back into her body. Then she manifested the skin condition.
Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
Good at all.
Ooh. So what this means is, this gets back into UFO abduction phenomena. Because I have cases even like beyond UFOs and stuff where people thought they were in their body for the entire abduction until they become physical again, and then they realize, oh my God, all of that was out of body.
That's
so
crazy.
we're playing with entities that are not playing by our rules. And if anything tells us that, it's that case study right there. They're not exclusive in their theology. They're using amulets against us like they're a mathematical equation.
Yeah, almost, with like humor or something like, these mean nothing to me. Here they all are.
Right. Right. And you're the ignorant species.
Right. There's the farm theory
It's
again.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. By the way, the only reference to some of that symbology I found in terms of high magic was Brahma the Mage. Brahma the Mage said that only angels employ those specific amulets. He called it angel magic.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Wow.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's terrifying stuff, but this is way deeper than, hey, I got an EVP.
Exactly. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
This is way deeper. I'm telling you. There's something out there in the darkness, and it's not fitting the bill of what we think it is. It's completely alien to us without being ET.
Yeah, it's and when you mention that too, Brahma and the Mage, that ritual, harkens back to Crowley and Jack Parsons and being,
Right.
A Thelemonite, being a Thelema. Very interesting stuff, and it's been explored, some of it before, by people like Crowley, trying to push the bounds, like what is out there and what are these things. One of the first images we have of something that looks like a gray comes from Crowley. What's his name?
Oh, Lamb.
Lamb.
Yeah, he's a homunculus.
Yes. Homunculus.
Yeah. And that comes. Yeah, it gets back to the golem. In the Bible, there's a term for uncreated potential, and so in the Hebrew language, even Adam, as the embryonic manifestation of man, they called him a golem because he is the potential. And so that's why when we get into the fetus, the missing fetus syndrome, the fetus itself would be considered a golem because it's something that is limited in its potential, and the potential is stopped, and then it's taken. So the homunculus is the golem, and the golem is the fetus. Same phenomenon.
Right. There it is.
Yep.
Greg says it's one of the best shows you guys have had. Nathaniel is unbelievable.
Thanks,
I need my flak jacket. Thank you, Greg.
It's safe. I was going to type. We need tinfoil hats too. Woo.
So agreed.
Joshua said he agreed.
No, this has been wonderful.
He says Joshua Dixon said we really don't have a choice. We are almost sitting ducks for all this phenomenon.
Well, that's true.
It's really true.
And
it's kind of terrifying, a little bit.
But having a platform like this to share this information, at least hopefully make some people more aware of what might be going on, around them, with them. You could be their neighbor. There's things going on in this world that that aren't so easily explainable, or definitely not talked about, and certainly not on all the ghost shows. So
right. It's occurring. But I think that a lot of these ghost shows are complicit in the propaganda these entities are pushing out. Right?
Right.
They're complicit with it. And so I'm to the point now where I've never been on a show, but if it's going to be on a show, I want it to be with somebody that's honorable, like Sam Baltrusis or Anito, my buddy Anito, James. I don't want to be on it, with somebody who is just out there to push a narrative. And, no, because I know the data, because I'm a grassroots researcher. I work in houses, so the phenomenon is real, but it's scarier than we ever thought it was. Way deeper, way darker. And we need to catch up, because demonology in and of itself is incomplete. But that's my rant, man.
Yeah, and these are bigger subjects in particular shows. So this has been fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
And
Thank you.
as always, we've loved having you on, and I feel enlightened. I feel like a smarter person having this conversation.
That's good. That's the goal.
I feel great. This is awesome. I've learned some good things. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody in our audience, Greg, Bob, Joshua, and everybody else who's joined us, Courtney, everybody out there. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, it has.
And super enlightening, and I just love it, man. I love it. But thank you again. I know you weren't feeling that great, so thank you for taking the time to help us pull this off. And we look forward to hanging out again.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Getting over to Federal Hill.
Let's go do this.
Getting our
I wish I could do that right now. Fly out right now. If I was a billionaire, we'd fly out and go get some Harry's burgers.
To you at some point.
I'm starving.
You got a steakhouse near you that I've seen the picture.
Oh, yes.
Which one is it?
I forget the name, but there's one that you go to on occasion. They got steaks, and it's like half a cow sitting there, and it looks so.
Oh, that's Smith & Wollensky's.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, that was a $248 steak.
What?
That's all?
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
That's crazy.
Well, I'm gonna start putting aside a few shekels for that.
Yeah.
Piece of
Oh,
meat,
yeah. Dude, I love you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you guys. Thank you so much for having me on your platform. I got to have you guys on my show and introduce you to my crew, and it'll be a blast.
Absolutely. And before we go, let's talk about that real fast. We had some people asking, and they might have missed the front of the show. The Ghost Notes, where can they find it? How do they come see you? And what's the best place to find Nathaniel J. Gillis?
So I have my own YouTube channel under Nathaniel Gillis. I'm up to 2,000 subscribers. I have a playlist of all of the interviews that I can find on YouTube. I think it's up to 77 now. So if you want to go back into the archive and watch it. I'm all over social media except Twitter. Under the same name, Nathaniel Gillis. Look me up on Facebook and Instagram. My show, The Ghost Notes, is every Thursday night on the Leak Project channel. So you have to go to the website. You can listen to it. And then it's up to Rex when he puts it on YouTube. But you can catch it live every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. And that's when, instead of it being an interview, I'll just shoot from the hip, and I'll give a presentation. And sometimes it's informative. Other times
they've all been good, man. And they do eventually make it to YouTube if you're not subscribed to Leak Project, but do check that out. And I think you get more too if you subscribe. There's more things that, besides seeing it earlier and sooner, you get some other bonuses as well. And your YouTube channel is awesome. And I did notice, because I happened to be on it today before the interview. I wanted to check something out that we could talk about. And I was like, wow, look at him. He's over 2,000 subscribers. So that's great, man. That's awesome. You're killing it.
I'm blessed,
and we're proud of you.
Yes,
and
we are.
We're psyched that and humbled by your presence. So thank you so much.
Great.
Love you guys. You're awesome, man.
Love you back.
Back.
All right, I'm going to play out a stream. I'm right with you. We're going to wrap things up. I hope you guys enjoyed that special Sunday edition of Bigfoot and the Bunny. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has.
And thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Because on this kind of short notice on a Sunday night. We'll see you guys again soon. We'll be back on Thursday with Dark Horse Paranormal, and next week with Bigfoot and the Bunny on Saturday. I think we're moving the times out. We're either going to go 6 to 8 on Saturdays.
The Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Rather than 4 to 6 in Eastern time. Just because I think it'll be more conducive to getting more of you guys out here. Mm-hmm. All right. But that's all we got.
Convenient.
Thanks, everybody, again for joining us.
Thanks again, guys.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by Well, you can't really know, can you? We could tell you anything and you'd probably just accept it. And with AI technology capable of creating deep fakes, you couldn't even be sure that it's a real person telling you who's sponsoring this podcast. So if I told you that the conspiracy thriller The Capture is back, with a gripping new series centered on the power of deep fake tech, would you believe me? Should you believe me?
Whoever's behind this is watching everything we do.
The Capture. Seeing is deceiving. Watch on BBC iPlayer.